as we know, there has been a lot of movement in the Bryan Kohberger case, probably in the last week, really in the last 48 hours. We have everybody that's come out now with a couple of new documents have come out, and everybody all of a sudden is a lawyer. Everybody's a DNA expert. Everybody basically is writing this guy off to walk. In my opinion, I think there's still a lot of complexity in this case. I think there's still a lot of things that are discovered. I think there's still a lot of evidence to be presented. And we're going to try to get through that tonight. So bear with me. Like I said, there's a lot of dates and times to go through, but we'll get through it. So defense says lack of DNA evidence. And this is in their most recent document here. And we'll start getting into you. Defense states lack of DNA evidence in new court document. So this is probably one of the last paragraphs in the defense's response to the state, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that as we go along, but just underlying the lack of DNA evidence, and in essence, through the lack of disclosure and their motion to protect the genetic genealogy investigation, the state is hiding its entire case. This is all a facade. This is all made up. That's basically what the defense is saying right now. Let's find out what they're actually doing, in my opinion. So first, before we get into it, it's just kind of like, I saw this, reading through the documents, not so fast. Maybe, really, it could be a possibility. And remember that guy not too long ago with the long beard? Every time I see this photo, I always want to go back and maybe grow the beard back, but we'll see. So first of all, before we get into the presentation, I want to say I am not a lawyer, not an expert, and all of my opinions are based purely on research and speculation. And as you know here, we stick to the legal documents. All right. Still everybody's attention? Moving along. All right. So what I'm going to do here is take you through a couple of things. And with the recent response to the state, in my opinion, the defense claims that Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath is basically a nothing burger. And we hear that term a lot now, a lot in this case when evidence is presented. Everybody seems to be an expert. A lot of fringe channels pop up and debate all this stuff, I think, before even really looking into it. And, drumming up a lot of bullshit. There's been a lot of bullshit in this case lately, and a lot of bullshit that people are saying. And, before I go on, I want to shout someone out. It's not a channel that I watch a lot. I have heard something that was presented on their channel the other day, but big shout out to T-Rev. Big shout out to T-Rev for calling bullshit what's bullshit. And I'm glad that he came out and did that stream against, all these people that are popping up with all this bullshit and interjecting, a lot of shit into this case and skewing, public perception of what's really going on, skewing people away from, the facts that are, coming out in this case. And look, I understand that there's Team Kohberger and there's team people that, think that they have the right guy. But big shout out, like I said, to T-Rev and calling out bullshit. I'm not going to get into it on this podcast, but you guys can go over and check out what he did the other day on his channel. But like I said, big shout out to T-Rev. So we're going to talk about, is there possible damage control going on by the defense? And I'm going to show you how I came to this conclusion or conclusions in this presentation. Okay, so we're moving along here, and I'm going to take you through a basic timeline and then kind of spread this out into, more of a visual presentation so you can get a good idea of what's going on here. So we're going to look at January 2023. We have to remember that the gag order is in place, and it's been in place all the way up until some loosening of it. And you'll see it at the bottom of this document on 6/23/23. So January 2023, the gag order is put into place. And I apologize if I don't get to the chat tonight. I just kind of want to get through this presentation. If I happen to look up and see something, I'll highlight it, but I'm really just going to get through this. Moderators, I'm really going to need you tonight because this is a long presentation and I don't want to like stop, and I'm not ignoring the chat, but I want to get through this because it is quite long. So on 6/16/23, the prosecution files state's motion for protective order. And basically what that breaks down to is discovery of the DNA evidence. That is the document that came out that everybody read and basically pointed Bryan Kohberger was a statistical match to that DNA on the knife sheath. Okay. So on 6/22/23, the defense now files a motion of declaration of BICKA BARLOW. And who is that? Well, she is a DNA expert, and she's going to support the defense on a motion to compel discovery that's going to be coming up on 6/27. Now, I don't know if she's going to completely be through the defense's team out through this trial, or it's just specifically being brought. She's being brought in to be heard in this motion. So on the 6/22/23, I find this very interesting as well, too. After this DNA expert was hired, the state now puts out a response. The defense now puts out a response to the state's discovery of DNA evidence and basically rejects the DNA findings by the state. On 6/23, the defense files the motion to compel discovery, and that's the motion that will happen on 6/27. And also that happened on that day, the gag order was loosened. So let's move forward here. So let's keep in mind, January 2023, cases under the gag order. So we have to keep that in mind. The gag order is still in place. It's been in place. I don't know the exact date that it was put on there. I was talking to one of my moderators about it. We couldn't come with the exact date, so I just said it happened in January. We're about 95% sure of that. And we're going to timeline this for you, and that was my basic timeline, but we're going to put some documents in, give you a visual presentation like I always do. Now, you're going to notice a P off to the left side of the screen. When you see P's in green, that's going to be the prosecution talking, okay? And then when you see a D that's in blue, that's going to be the defense. So they're talking or responding. So we have the timeline. 6/16/23, the prosecution files state's motion for protective order. That is the discovery of DNA evidence. All right. And basically, when you read through all of that document, that 33-page document, it comes up at the end and basically says the comparison shown a statistical match specifically to the STR profile is at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to be seen if the defendant is the source than if an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population is the source. Essentially, what they're saying is that DNA on that knife sheath that was found next to Madison and Kaylee was Bryan Kohberger's DNA. Statistically matches up with that. And that's a big number, 5.37 octillion times. And that's by the prosecution. So you're probably going to ask me, what is 1 octillion? What is an octillion? Okay. An octillion is a fucking huge number. It's got 27 zeros after it. The statistical, this is 5 times over. The statistical match in this is 5 times what 1 octillion is. It's essentially the state is saying this is Bryan Kohberger's DNA. And you can look up some fun facts here. An octillion, gallons of water, is a sphere, would be 190,000 kilometers wide. That's somewhere between the size of Jupiter and the sun. So that spread between the Jupiter and the sun is an octillion. It's pretty crazy. It's big. Okay. Everybody's still following me. I hope so. Give me a thumbs up there if you guys are all following me. Guys and ladies always say, titanium built in the house. How are you? I'm going to reach out to her soon. I've been so busy. I did this huge presentation today, but I'm going to reach out to you soon, and we're going to do a show together. All right. So 1 octillion. Give me a thumbs up. Everybody's with me. Fantastic. Everybody loving the presentation so far? I hope so. Okay. So now we're going to timeline this again. The D is in the corner. The D is the defense. On 6/22/23, the defense files notion of filing declaration for BICKA BARLOW in support of the defense third motion to compel. And that compel is for discovery. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of background here, Bryan Kohberger's defense team has hired BICKA BARLOW as a DNA forensic legal expert. The price tag will be upwards to $650 per hour, but her credentials are impressive. See below. And I forgot to note that Jennifer Coffindaffer actually was tweeting about this. BK's team is certainly loaded with the best experts money can buy. I'm still amazed BK's team was afforded taxpayer dollars to hire not one, but two media experts just to weigh in on whether cameras should be allowed in the courtroom or whether the gag order would stay in place. It would seem their experts had little sway on Judge. And we're going to get to the gag order a little later in this presentation. Let me get a sip of water here. Excuse me. I love this. Real quick, PK says, I got tired of all the conspiracy, the victim blaming, cop bashing channels. Sticking with this one, lawyer, T-Rev, Titanium, and Watts. PKC, I absolutely agree. And thank you for coming over and hanging out. I hope you find some real knowledge in this presentation this evening. Okay. So we have the credentials of BICKA BARLOW, University of San Francisco School of Law, 1992 to 1995. We have Cornell University, a master's in science, genetics, and development, 1985 to 1990, in the University of California, Berkeley, Science of Genetics, 1982 to 84. A huge pedigree. I had dates and times here, but I'm not going to really, I just don't think it's really relevant to what I'm trying to do here this evening. I don't want to confuse you all too much, but hopefully you're kind of following me along. All right, so I'm going to move on through the timeline. So what is the motion to compel to discovery? The first filing on that is, it's basically an evidence hearing. They're basically asking, for the state to turn over any filings, book work, notes, video footage, lab tests, DNA evidence, all those things that would circumvent evidence in this case. Anything that's pertinent to this case, they want to see it. That's a compelled to discovery. Okay. So the first one was filed on 5/4/23. So then you had the state's response. They come back on 5/12/23. And I know we've kind of gone back in history a little bit more than the present days. So what did they do? So the state comes out and they say, well, we've given approximately 10,000 pages, reports, and other written materials, approximately 10,200 photographs, approximately 9,200 tips. And the big one, what everybody has heard about, is approximately 51 terabytes of audio, video, media footage, and digital materials, and so on. And there's a list of so many other things, numerous lab reports. The state has disclosed all items aware of relating to the search and arrest of Bryan Kohberger in Pennsylvania. So they handed over all those files. We keep moving on. More ISP lab reports. You have reports and memos, just a litany of evidence in this. And the last paragraph says on here, as the state has indicated in its response to prior discovery requests from the defense, the state has and will continue to provide discovery in accordance with IRC 16 and the applicable law. And I know we've heard a lot about ICR 16 lately. That's been in a lot of these legal documents that have become forward. And basically what that is the discovery. It's essentially evidence. Anything that's to do with this case is basically with IRC 16. You can look it up. I'm sorry, I keep saying ICR 16 Idaho. You can look that up. Laura and I actually did a presentation on that a long time ago when all these new documents drops, and you can go back and actually watch that. I don't know the title of it, but I remember we were explaining what all that meant. My brain is so fried today from going through this. So to get all back into that, I just don't think it's going to be helpful in what I'm trying to show here. So we will move along. That was the prosecution or the state. So now in our timeline, you look at the defense. The defense comes back and files an objection to the state motion for protective order. That's basically they're rejecting the state's DNA evidence. They're saying, listen, what you found, the way you found it, how you found it has nothing to do with my client. Has nothing to do with him, does not implicate him, does not put him there. It's not found, there's no DNA evidence found in his car, his home, his office, whatever you're saying, it's not there. Essentially what they're saying in this document. The defense now files another on the same day, a motion to compel hearing, and that is an evidence hearing once again. And I find that interesting. I find it very interesting because if we go back and look, and I'm going to bring this back, what did they do? Yeah, let me see if I got my timeline right. I think that was the 23rd. Yeah, so what did they do a day before that? They hired a DNA expert. And now they want to have another hearing about discovery. And I'm going to get to my general overall point soon. Trust me. This hearing will happen on 6/27. So if you look here, it says down there below where my pointer is 6/27/23 at 1:30. It's the third motion to compel. So they're asking for more evidence. But I find it interesting. They have now hired a DNA expert. Oh, and on the same day, Judge loosens the gag order in the Idaho murder case against Bryan Kohberger. That's on the same day. So now the gag order is loosened. So you're going to be able to hear a little bit more about what's going on in the media. Judge basically says on 6/23, the gag order is loosened. That was at 2:00 p.m. And Judge says, given the high profile nature of this case, the public's interest in watching what is happening in the courtroom and Mr. Kohberger's fundamental right to a fair trial by an impartial jury, the court will reserve ruling on the issue of cameras in the courtroom. The court has faced with a difficult task of ensuring the proceedings are open to the public while safeguarding Kohberger's right to a fair trial. I agree. I have to agree with that. We want to have a fair trial, but we want to have an open trial. We want to be able to hear what's going on. We want to be able to make sure that everything in that courtroom is to the law, it is legal, it is presented correctly, that Bryan Kohberger gets a fair trial, and that these victims get represented properly as well. There can be no more smoke. There can be no more mirrors. There can be no more bullshit. We want the truth. If Bryan Kohberger right now is innocent until proven guilty, and if he is not guilty of this crime, then we got a lot of work to do in this investigation to figure out who did this. Okay. The best way to continue the balance of those interests is to revisit the issues of the camera in the courtroom as the case unfolds. This case has discretion to either allow or disallow video recordings and proceedings. For now, cameras in the courtroom will continue to be allowed. However, it is subject to change by further order of the court. That was signed by John C. Judge. I love that name. And it's dated the 23rd of June. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to get a quick sip of water. Is everybody still following me? Give me a thumbs up in the chat. Everybody's still following me. I appreciate you all. I appreciate you all. Okay. Give me a thumbs up. Let me see. So now I have the question. If the defense isn't so worried about the DNA evidence and they say this is all fabricated evidence by the state to take down their client, essentially a nothing burger, why would they bring on an expert in DNA analysis on their team, especially before this hearing, this discovery hearing? If it's a nothing burger, and they're not worried about this, then why would they bring in a DNA expert to help them? Think about that. And I'm going to acknowledge this $5 super chat. Iron Range Rube, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. I appreciate you so much. And I'm not sure if my sounds are working tonight. I haven't listened in a while. I don't think they are. Yeah, it's not hooked up. Oh, there it is. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with that. Think about that. We're going to go forward here. It still doesn't explain how Bryan Kohberger's DNA ended up on the knife sheath next to two dead bodies. It still doesn't explain that. Okay, so what I want to look at now is the legal battle between the two documents. So the prosecution filed basically their evidence of DNA on 6/16/23, and then the defense came back where they're basically objecting to what the state says. They reject the DNA findings by the state. And I want to compare, because this is very interesting when you line this up and you look at the language that everybody's using. Okay. So remember the PPP, that's the prosecution or the state. Okay. So we'll read through this really quick. So they're on the 16th, they release their document. It says on November 13, 2022, the law enforcement found the bodies of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin at 112 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. All four victims died from apparent knife wounds. Law enforcement found a K-bar knife sheath on a bed next to the bodies of Madison and Kaylee. The sheath was face down and partially under Madison's body and the comforter on the bed. Law enforcement seized the K-bar knife sheath pursuant to a search warrant. The Idaho State Police Lab in Meridian, Idaho, located DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. The ISP laboratory determined the DNA came from a single source and that the source was male. Now the defense comes back, and this is their response to the state on the 22nd. This is interesting. On November 13, 2022, law enforcement responding to a 911 call found Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin deceased. Law enforcement later found a K-bar knife sheath placed next to Miss Mogen on her bed. Remember placed, because I'm going to go back to that. The sheath was placed button side down, partially under Miss Mogen and a comforter. On November 20th, 2022, the Idaho State Police Lab in Meridian, Idaho, located DNA on the button of a sheath and performed STR analysis that led to nowhere when ran through CODIS. Okay, let's go back to placed. Now, this is my opinion. I'm only speculating. What I get from the word placed is that they're saying, again, this is allegedly, this is my opinion. What does placed mean? Well, that would mean that someone put it there. And if you look at when they ran the DNA through CODIS, it didn't come up with anybody. And we know what STR DNA, when you run it through CODIS, what are they trying to do? They're trying to see if that DNA has ever been come up in any other crimes. So of course, we found out in the state's document that when they ran it, we found out that Bryan Kohberger's DNA never popped up in any other crime. So if he committed this crime, it would be his first crime that he either committed or was involved with. Everybody still with me? Yes. Some are saying playing chess. Yes. You're understanding my presentation. You're understanding my presentation. Okay. Well, of course he wasn't in CODIS, right? He wasn't in CODIS, so his DNA would not hit, and he's never committed another crime. As now we found out, that's why he wasn't in CODIS. All right, let's keep moving on. So now we have the prosecution. Basically, they're just going back and saying what the defense said, that there was no match found through CODIS. Okay, so we've made that clear, and the state or prosecution acknowledges that as well. Now we go back to the defense. By December 17, 2022, lab analysis were aware of 2 additional male DNA within the house where the deceased were located, and another unknown male DNA on a glove found outside the residence on November 20th, 2022. To this date, the defense is unaware of what sort of testing, if any, was conducted on these samples other than STR DNA profiles. Further, these 3 separate and distinct male DNA profiles were not identified through CODIS. Okay, so those DNA, they weren't involved in a crime, leading to the conclusion that the profiles did not belong to Mr. Kohberger. Well, of course. And I look at this as well, too. December 17th and November 20th, let's see, where was I? 2 additional male DNA. Well, yeah, of course there would be probably other DNA. If I was to walk into my mother's house and sat down in the chair and I left, there would be DNA there. If she was to have a neighbor over and they sat down in her chair, there probably would be DNA there. There would be DNA there. Of course, this was a party house. People came and went through that entire house. So yeah, it would make sense that there would be other male DNA in that house. All right, let's keep moving on. So the prosecution now talks about, in this portion of their presentation or their legal document, about the IgG discovery, how it led, all the process that they did to get through the using the IgG to come to the determination that this was Bryan Kohberger's statistical match to the DNA. Yeah, I love this too. So now going back to defense says, well, while this was all going on, meaning how the prosecution was sorting through this DNA, coming to the determination of the statistical match, well, while this is all going on, police were investigating many various possible suspects. Many of them provided DNA. At least one had his DNA surreptitiously taken from a discarded cigarette. Many also had their phones taken and downloaded. Surreptitiously, if you don't know what it means, in a way that is an attempt to avoid notice or attention secretly. So prosecution comes back and says the STR profile is at least 5.73 octillion times more likely to be seen if defendant is the source than unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population is the source. The genealogy conducted by the FBI resulted in leading that point law enforcement to the defendant. So while the prosecution is explaining the DNA on that sheath is a high statistical match to Bryan Kohberger, placing him there near that knife sheath, near that bed where Madison and Kaylee are dead. The defense comes back and says, one area of the investigation had to do with a white sedan seen on camera located at 1120 to King Road, first glimpsed by officers on November 18, 2022. By November 25th, 2022, police believed the car would be a white Elantra and asked law enforcement to be on the lookout for one. Precisely how the police came to believe the car was an Elantra is still unknown. A report from an analysis from the FBI dated March 21st, 2023 shows the analysis heavily relying on video of the car heading in the wrong direction and at the wrong time on Ridge Road. Prosecution in their presentation comes back and says the information provided to local law enforcement by the FBI was nothing more than a tip, a lead for local law enforcement to follow up on should they choose to. The defense argues tipped local law enforcement to investigate. All right, so here we go. The state's latest finding admits that somewhere within all of, I love this. The state's latest filings admits that somewhere within all of this, they engaged in IgG using the DNA taken from a button on a sheath, and now claims that it is due to the use of the technique that it tipped local law enforcement to investigate Mr. Kohberger. So my point here is, if they're saying, if the defense is basically saying that the state is claiming all this and they're not really worried about all this, then why did they hire a DNA expert? Why did they hire a DNA expert? It remains unclear what the police first filed in focusing on their investigation on Mr. Kohberger. And I love this too. No matter, I love this, no matter what came first, and automatically it popped right in my head. That's why I have my little chicken and my little egg. No matter what came first, the car or the genetic genealogy, the investigation provided precious little. No matter what came first, the chicken or the egg. There is no connection between Mr. Kohberger and the victims. There's no explanation for the total lack of evidence from the victims in Mr. Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. Do we know that yet? Have we heard all of that yet? That's why I have that question mark. In essence, through the lack of disclosure and their motion to protect the genetic genealogy investigation, the state is hiding its entire case. Are they really? Because you're even saying it. You're saying the lack of disclosure. Is it that you haven't found the evidence? They've handed over a lot. Are you too lazy to go through it? Is that what it is? I want to thank Carrie H for gifting a membership. Thank you so much. And it looks like LJD3 has become a new member. And my sounds are not working tonight. It's okay. But dun, 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 dun. It might play. I don't know. Something's good. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Carrie H. I appreciate you. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right. What I want to do now, and this is mwah. It is mwah. I love this. This is my favorite part of this presentation. I want to read this because basically what this is, and this is what I see. You have the state that came out on the 5th. I forget, it was the 15th or the 16th. Let me go back to my date so I get these correct, because I don't want to be, because I know someone will nail me down in the comments if I don't get my dates correct. All right. So you have the state that came out on the 16th and basically laid out how all this DNA evidence brought them to Bryan Kohberger. Okay. Then you have the defense's response on the 22nd, where they're just basically rejecting and saying this has nothing to do with it. They know, the defense knows that the public has access to these court documents. We can read them. And if you haven't read them, I'm going to drop. That is the link to the Kohberger files on the state of Idaho Judicial Branch website. It's idaho.gov. Just scroll down. You can read all of the documents there. They know, the defense knows that those documents are live. You can go and look at them. It's for public consumption. You can look at them. They know. So the prosecution comes out on the 16th. They say, look, here's all our DNA evidence. This is how we got it. This is what led us to Bryan Kohberger. That's pretty damning. The DNA on that knife sheath is a statistical match, 5.37 octillions, Bryan Kohberger. Then all of a sudden, the defense hires this DNA expert and then releases a statement basically poo-pooing all of this DNA evidence. It's basically, in my opinion, to clean up Bryan Kohberger's image in the media, on social media, across YouTube platforms. They know that you can go in and read this stuff, so why not fire back? To me, it's smoke and mirrors. It's smoke and mirrors, in my opinion. But let's look through this. I want to oh, I love this. This gets to be like some Alex Jones shit. All right, let's pull this up. Let me widen this. Okay, this is really good. This is really good. Okay, let's see. Absolutely, Brian. Everybody's agreeing. Danielle's agreeing. Thank you so much. I knew I would get to my point. It was just going to take me a little while to get there, but I knew I would get to my point. I knew I would get to my point. Yeah, I mean, here you go. And found a way around the gag order. That's essentially what they're doing. If they get it into a legal document, they know everybody can read this stuff. If they can get out there, they can get their point out there and say, hey, look, you know, read this. He's innocent. He wasn't there. You know, this is all, I'm telling you, let's get through this. These 5 pages are, you know, and all these fucking stupid channels that sit here and go, this guy's going to walk. It's going to this. It's going to that. Oh, you know, they don't have anything. If you took the time and timeline this stuff and use the thing that's up here, the peanut that's put up here in our skull, you'd figure all this out and you wouldn't put all this misinformation out there. And listen, I'm not saying that I'm 100% right. I'm not even saying that I'm 50% right. But when I sit and think about it, I use logic. I don't just read through a document really quick, turn on my camera and go live with it and say, oh, yeah, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. You know, I don't do that. I try to formulate some really good ideas and evidence to support what I'm talking about. And again, I may be wrong. I'm not a fucking lawyer. I'm just some idiot that turns on my camera and does presentations. And you all hang out and watch. All right. Let's look at this argument because it's, and this is from the defense. I love this. Good stuff. I love good courtroom battles. I love this stuff. I eat it up. I eat this stuff up. Let me get a quick sip of water and then we'll start reading through this. So the argument here is the state apparently thinks that they need to explain how they came to think that this was Mr. Kohberger's DNA on the sheath. Presumably, the defense is expected to accept at face value that the sheath had touch DNA just waiting for testing by all the FBI resources. Additionally, the defense is to guess whether the state focused its investigation on Mr. Kohberger via a bizarrely complex DNA tree experiment or through its faulty identification of a vehicle involved in this case. I love this. This is like a movie. It's like a movie script. And I'm not saying that in a jokingly way. I know this is very sensitive. It's very serious stuff. But this is good stuff. Perhaps, unsurprisingly, Mr. Kohberger does not accept that his defense does not need this information. It rather obviously falls within the omit rule of 16b4 and 5 a fact that the state's briefing makes clear in its kitchen sink approach to their briefing. The state begins their argument claiming Rule 16 has no interest in IgG testing, and that it ends with their argument claiming that somehow people will stop sharing their genetics if they realize that the government is watching. The government is watching. Both arguments must fail. To begin with, the state apparently only wants to prevent Mr. Kohberger from seeing how the IgG profile was created and how many people, how many other people the FBI chose to ignore during their investigation. In essence, the state argues that if later the STR testing is accurate, then there is no reason to concern ourselves with how the state came to investigate Mr. Kohberger. State's brief at 9. What the state's argument asked this court and Mr. Kohberger to assume is that the DNA on the sheath was placed there by Mr. Kohberger and not someone else during the investigation that spans hundreds of members of law enforcement and apparently at least one lab the state refuses to name. Perhaps most puzzling is the state's argument with while Rule 16b-5 requires them to turn over the results or reports from significant investigations, excuse me, and it does not require the state to disclose the law enforcement does with the results or reports. State's brief at 14. First of all, it sounds like an admission that the information as to how IgG was carried out should be disclosed. Second, what the law enforcement does not result or reports is recovered by Rule, excuse me, 16b-6 statement, prosecuting witness, and 8 police reports. Let me just get to this super chat. Tsunami, one of my channel mods, says, Ryan, this super chat is to you to get a swear jar. Every time you drop bombs, put $1 in your jar. Think it as of a savings account. I'm fired up tonight, man. I'm fired up tonight. Thank you for the $5. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. That's great. Okay. Frankly, the fact that members of the FBI are so concerned about permitting Mr. Kohberger to know what they were up to with supposedly his DNA does not give one impression that there is nothing to see here, as the state seems to imply. Excuse me. Finally, the state claims that the IRC 16G2 applies to this matter is quite bizarre. Presumably, the independent company the government relied on was paid for its work and would stand by in a court. The state provides no real argument as to why the company needs to be protected. Mr. Kohberger is left to suspect they wish to keep their methods from being, and we have a new member here, Sunflower Soul 615 has become a new member. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. You can go over and look at all my, if you haven't, I've been doing members only content. I've been dropping a video once a week for all my members. You can go over and check out my members only section. You'll get, you'll get all access to that. So thank you so much and welcome aboard to the team. Thank you. Appreciate you. Okay. So, wish to keep their methods from being questioned. The extent that there is some concern about intellectual property that can be addressed via protection order permits Mr. Kohberger and his defense team to review their work. Second, the state appears to argue that everyone living on Earth, I love this, the state appears to argue that everyone living on Earth provides genetic information is A, unaware that their DNA could be used by the government somewhere for something. Man, the government. Oh, the dark forces. The dark force, the government, man. AZ will know what I'm talking about. Yeah, man, the government. Bing, bing, bong, bong, it's the government. The state citation to ease involving actual informants hardly helped to keep incredible leap. No court. Big Brother, man. Here it is, man. I gotta cut that. The state citation to case involving actual informants hardly helped it keep this incredible leap. No court has ever found the existence of DNA informant. It would rather appear that the state is acknowledging that the companies are providing personal information to the state, and those companies and the government would suffer if the public were to realize it. The only two databases that will allow access are ones already informed their users, and the users could opt in to allow law enforcement searches. The state by the government implies that database search may only be the ones law enforcement specifically barred from, which explains why they do not want to disclose their methods. In fact, the government is looking at the genetic information that people are sharing was at all an issue. And then the state, very public acknowledgement of investigations is clearly a big mistake. In any case, it is hard to understand why Mr. Kohberger should be the one to suffer because of these companies in our government chose to either mislead or not educate the public. According to Pew Research Center in February 2020, 48% of respondents thought it was acceptable to give their data to law enforcement to solve crimes. 33% said no, and 18% were unsure. James Halpin, police use forensic genome. They're citing a book or an article. However, 60% thought there were genetic information could not be shared with other companies' ID. There is no federal law about sharing a genetic information, but don't these sites, when you sign up to these sites, so let's just say it's like 23andMe, don't they make you sign like 9 million times that your information could be used in a criminal investigation? I'm going to skip all this here and go down. Mr. Kohberger has reasons to be extremely suspicious of IgG used in this case, rather than seeing it as some sort of complex tree building that led to him. It appears far more like a lineup where the government, man, was already aware of who they wanted to target, rather than have an investigation done by someone blind to the fact the FBI chose to do it themselves. This is akin to the police pulling in Mr. Kohberger and 5 of his cousins off the street and then pointing at him. The only authority the state has in its favor is trial court order from a California case that settled before it could lead you anywhere. This decision relied on the People versus Johnson 139, sustaining the case here. The court in Johnson was not decided whether a defendant had a right to know how he was identified, only that his identification could come in trial without a mini trial about it. A better case in this issue is the state versus Ortega. And I'm not going to read through all that, but we'll just get to, if you want to go back and read that in the document. So it says here, Mr. Kohberger finds himself in a similar position as Mr. Ortega. A massive investigation came to focus on him and him alone. The state appears to be trying to hide its original demeanor, such as he cannot discover why. Mr. Kohberger has a right to discover and question the investigation led upon him. This court should so find. And that is it. That is the response from Ann Taylor, the public defender. And, when I look at all of this, the way that it's being presented, again, I think this is a way to, let me just bring this down, a way to get, find your way around the gag order, put it in a legal document, put it out there for the public to consume, put it out there for the media to consume, put it out there for social media to consume, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, Twitter, to get everybody to listen to Bryan Kohberger's defense team. It's smoke and mirrors. It still does not explain how Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found on a knife sheath next to 2 dead bodies, Kaylee and Madison, which I find it very strange that in the defense's document, they don't even list Kaylee. Why? Why are they not listing Kaylee? They're only listing Madison. which is very strange. So again, I think this is a state's response to get around that gag order, to kind of poo-poo what the defense, to poo-poo what the state has put out there. And it's a response. And again, like I said, we can go on and read these documents on the website, and I'll be interested to see what reports are going to say tomorrow, what kind of articles come out. I'll be interested to see what will be out there in the Twitter sphere, what will be out there. Well, I already know what's happening on YouTube. A lot of bullshit, a lot of misinformation. That shit needs to stop, by the way. You know, if you come on and just say these completely unfactual things, and that you can go to bed at night and lay your head down after saying those things about the victims, the families, the investigation, you know, you need to morally check yourself. And you need to stop with all this, all these fringe channels that pop up, these crazy people. I don't have to name the channels. You know who they all are. You guys all watch. You guys and ladies all watch. So, no, I didn't swear. I didn't swear. But hopefully this presentation tonight gave a little bit of clarity, just gave you kind of how I feel on this. Again, I'm not saying that I'm 100% right. This is my view. This is my platform. This is my channel. This is my opinion. If you don't like it, you can fuck off, because I'm not holding back anymore. I'm not holding back anymore. This is my channel. This is my channel. It's my platform. It's the way I feel. Let me recognize this $10 super chat. Iron Range Rube, $10 super chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate you so much.
Straight cash, homie.
Yeah, it's cool, man. You know, listen, people can come here. I know a lot of people don't agree with me. It's perfectly fine. But it's my channel. It's my platform. And you know, people need to stop with this bullshit. Titanium says, I love it. Thank you so much. And listen, thank you so much for that $10 super chat. A lot of new faces in here, a lot of new subscribers. I appreciate it. Everybody's loving. I've been spicy lately. I definitely have been spicy lately. So again, I hope you found some, you know, good context in all of this. I hope you can digest it. Listen, I know that 50% of you will agree with me, 50% won't, maybe 25% agree, 75% won't. But we're done. You know, we're done with the bullshit. We're done with the bullshit. Definitely done with the bullshit. Hey, everybody, if you've made it this far in the video, I just wanted to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the content today, please give it a thumbs up. Oh, also, on the way out, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on. So every time I drop a new video, you guys will be informed. And somewhere up here while I'm talking, you're probably going to see another video pop up. Make sure to click on that video as well. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.